Hello everyone, how are we all doing today? My name is Emily and I am coming to you from a very hot London. It was the high 90s today and London is just not a city equipped for a lot of heat. So despite the best efforts of our large tower fan, I am still quite drenched in sweat. But that's not what we're talking about in today's video. Today we are talking about my July wrap up. So all of the books that I read in the month of July. I read a total of 9 books last month, so a marginal improvement of the previous month. For the past couple months, it seems I keep doing this thing where I start off the month really strong, and then there's a week in the middle where I kind of have a slump. I don't particularly feel like reading, so I just don't read anything, and then all of a sudden at the end, I power through a couple books. But I think at the end of last month, Reading Rush really helped motivate me to get through those last few books. So maybe not my best reading month, but overall I still feel pretty accomplished. So let's get right to it. Let's talk about some books. So the first book I finished in the month of July was Under the Pendulum Sun by Jeanette Ng. I had started reading it during the previous month, but I wasn't that far into it, so I just powered through the rest in the first week of July. Under the Pendulum Sun is about a girl called Catherine Helston. Her brother is a missionary who has traveled to the land of the Fae in order to convert the Fae to Christianity. Catherine has sensed that something has gone very wrong with her brother's mission, so she goes to see what's up with him. So I think the marketing of this book was very slightly misleading. The blurb of the book gives you the impression that there's going to be some sort of pursuit and chase and escape. But it's not so much a rescue mission that Catherine embarks on. I feel like she engages more in a mystery plot in this book. So when Catherine gets to Arcadia, she does meet up with her brother, but she also gets a sense that something about the place they're living isn't quite right, and that there is a mystery to how this place works and things that the Fae are hiding from them. But I loved this book. I loved the really gothic atmosphere. I loved how Jeanette Ng made the Fae so weird and frightening, because that is how Fae should be. You really got the sense that the Fae in this book are on a different level. They have a whole different mindset to humans, and they are completely alien. And in a world full of Sarah J. Maas-like fairies, this was just incredibly refreshing. I will say that this book relies a lot, and maybe a little too much, on biblical knowledge for its plot. A lot of times the two siblings will use their knowledge of the Bible to figure out different clues about the place they live and about the Fae. And it makes perfect sense because both these siblings were raised in incredibly Christian environments, and Catherine's brother is a missionary. But nonetheless, I kept feeling like, should I have studied up on the Bible before I read this book? I kept having to reread the biblical sections that they quoted because I didn't quite know what was going on in the block of text that they quoted, and also I didn't know the context either. Context for biblical quotes is very important. So that was my one complaint about the book. I will concede that this book is not for everybody, and not everyone is going to like the really gothic style writing. Not everyone is going to like the plot twist and unplot twist, which is the only way I can describe those things, towards the end of the novel. There's a twist towards the end that people might find slightly icky. I didn't personally have an issue with it when considering the themes of the book, but I get why some people might have an issue with it. I was looking for a gothic fantasy with Fae, and this was it for me. I really love it. This is, I think, one of the most underrated fantasy books I've read this year. And if that's the sort of thing you're looking for, I highly recommend this book. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. Next up, I read Darth Vader, Dark Lord of the Sith, Volume 1 by Charles Soule. This is the first volume of the 2017 or 2018 Darth Vader comic book series by Marvel. So this comic book series picks up immediately after Anakin Skywalker has become Darth Vader in Revenge of the Sith. And in this volume, we follow him as he constructs his first red lightsaber, which every Sith has. And we also see him being sent on missions to eradicate the last of the Jedi. I had heard a lot of good things about Charles Soule's Darth Vader comics, so I decided to pick this one up. And in general, I'd been wanting to go outside of the film realms in the Star Wars universe, like picking up books and comics. And I was also really interested in this period of Darth Vader's life right after he has just converted to the dark side. And I love being able to see him dealing with these remnants of his former life and having that inner conflict. Because I'm of a mind that Anakin Skywalker and Darth Vader are one and the same, which means Darth Vader can never really shake off the history of Anakin Skywalker. And I love that there are new comics and books that are exploring how Darth Vader deals when he encounters aspects of his past and how he reacts and feels that inner conflict. And of course, I love seeing that in this graphic novel. I think it was really well done. And also, I love seeing how OP Darth Vader is, because he was incredibly powerful when he was Anakin Skywalker and a Jedi, but now he's a Sith and he has nothing left to lose. So all he has to do is just be a powerful SOB. So I also gave this 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. So I was on a real Darth Vader streak. So next up, I read The Rise and Fall of Darth Vader. This is a junior novel in the Star Wars Legends universe, so it's technically no longer canon. So this is basically the Star Wars movies, except through Anakin/Vader's eyes. So of course Anakin Skywalker is my favorite character, and even when he's Vader, I'm always really interested in his perspective, so of course I wanted to read this book. So I ended up finding this quite simplistic. Like, for what it is, a junior novel from this character's perspective, I guess it was fine, but I do think that this book missed a lot of opportunities to delve a lot deeper into Anakin's various relationships, like with his mother, with his wife, and with his children. Especially his relationship with his wife Padme, because that's such an important relationship that really does push him over the edge when he thinks that is in danger. So I felt like this book added some nice character touches, but overall just kind of scratched the surface where a lot of character development was concerned. And also this book made some really bizarre choices, because like, we go into Anakin Skywalker's perspective in Phantom Menace, and we get this blow-by-blow account of his perspective during the pod race, but then we just skim over all the events of the Battle of Naboo, where he blows up a whole droid control ship, but it's just like, oh yeah, well, that happened, so what's next? Like, I get they wanted to still do a junior novel, but I don't know, the things they chose to go into detail for, but then there were other things that they skimmed over that I thought didn't make sense. So I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. It was whatever. It was kind of an easy read for me. Next up, I finished Positive Magic by Marianne Weinstein, which I had been reading with my witchy book club. So this book was written in the 1970s, and I guess it was geared towards people who were going into witchcraft for the first time. And I think in that decade, witchcraft was even less acceptable than it is now. So a lot of the book seems to be posing witchcraft as a thing that is an alternative to Christianity rather than just a thing in and of itself. And unfortunately, that is a characteristic of a lot of books about magic from the 70s through even the 90s with Scott Cunningham. So that was one thing in the book that didn't really sit right with me and other people in my book club. So this book is trying to be a beginner's guide for people who are new to magic and witchcraft. And this book is specifically, as you can tell by the title, trying to steer people towards the positive side of magic, which is like a super contradictory aspect of the book, because there's a whole chapter about how there are no binaries. The binaries are a thing of the past age, and in the future we are supposed to break down binaries in morality. We're supposed to break down strict moral structures of the past. And yet this book is very focused on steering you towards one side of the binary between positive and negative magic. So this book was definitely a bit hypocritical and contradictory in its rhetoric, and also incredibly dogmatic as well, and super preachy. I did like certain things that she had to say about past lives and such, and about karma, but overall this book didn't really sit right with me. It felt very antiquated, and also I just didn't like the tone with which this author talked about magic. It just isn't really my personal philosophy regarding magic. So I gave this 2 stars stars on Goodreads. I didn't really like it. There were so many other books on magic that I would rather read. Next up, I read The Phantom of Menace by Ian Desher. This is part of the William Shakespeare's Star Wars series, and this is of course based on The Phantom Menace. I have spoken many times on the channel about how much I love this book series. And of course, I really love this book, and I was really looking forward to seeing the prequels Shakespeareified because I do like the prequels. I will say that there were things that didn't jive very well with me in this book. I think I talked about these things in my Reading Rush vlog, but I'll rehash them again. I think one very crucial decision that Ian Desher made was to do something different with Jar Jar. Because Jar Jar is a very unpopular character in the prequels. So Ian Desher, I guess, decided to fix him and make him secretly intelligent. Because Jar Jar is supposed to be this buffoon who messes stuff up in the movies, and I guess Ian Desher decided, oh, well, what if there is a rhyme and reason to all the things that he's doing? So Jar Jar will often speak with other characters like he does in the films in his typical dialect. But then he'll have an aside and talk to the audience, and he'll be completely articulate and talk about how he has a reason for doing what he's doing and how he has a motive. But I think that kind of ruins Jar Jar, because I like Jar Jar as this sort of pure-hearted klutz who's just trying to do his best and he just fails up. But then when you make him secretly smart, that just adds a whole other layer of complication to everything he does, because he does so much stupid shit in the films. So that decision didn't really sit well with me. And also there were other writing decisions that I didn't really agree with, like when Qui-Gon dies, when Darth Maul kills him, he's like, "Et tu, Sith?" And I'm like, well, that line is from Caesar, and that works in Caesar because Brutus was Caesar's friend, and Caesar is like, oh my god, I was betrayed by Brutus. But Qui-Gon was not betrayed by the Sith. They were always enemies from the start. So that line, "Et tu, Sith," just didn't land the same way because it doesn't have the same context and therefore not the same emotional impact. But overall, this was a really fun book. I did really enjoy it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Next up, I read North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell. This was the first book that I read for Reading Rush. I read this for several Reading Rush prompts, but one of the prompts was read a book that inspired or was adapted into a TV series or a movie that you like. So I love the miniseries North and South, so of course I wanted to read this book. So North and South is about a girl called Margaret Hale, and she and her family have relocated to the north of England, to the very industrial town of Milton, which is really a fictional version of Manchester. And there she becomes very acquainted with the industrial culture of the town. She meets a mill owner called John Thornton, and they butt heads over their ideas about social justice and how to treat workers. And she also befriends mill workers who are suffering from the current work conditions. So I really enjoyed this book. It was a bit slow for the first 8 or so chapters, but once we got acquainted to our 2 main characters, Margaret and John, I enjoyed it incredibly. I loved watching them interact and debate with each other. The funny thing about this book is that I don't think reviewers can really agree about whether this book lands on the socialist or capitalist side of that debate. Some people are like, this is Pride and Prejudice for socialists, and some people are like, this book is capitalist propaganda. And I saw this and I was like, I bet this book is neither one of those things. Now, I've read the book, and in conclusion, yeah, it's neither of those things. I think this book is really good at exploring both the mentality of the free market people, the pull yourself up by your own bootstraps mentality of a lot of people who have risen up in the world and run businesses. But also it explores very much in depth the suffering of workers and the importance of unions. And also this book very much advocates for the improvement of worker conditions and, you know, treating them well. So I find this book more of a discussion rather than a proponent of one side versus the other. I will say that a difficulty I encountered in this book is that the prose in this book is rather antiquated. I took a while to get used to the Victorian turns of phrase, and also several of the characters speak in this very heavy northern dialect, which Elizabeth Gaskell spells out almost phonetically in the book. So I was glad for my audiobook, because the audiobook helped me figure out what they were actually saying, because it was just so hard to figure out when I was just reading it on the page. There's a lot of debating about different philosophies and the practicalities of different aspects of the cotton industry in Northern England, so people might get a little bit tired of that. I wouldn't blame them. Personally, I found that really interesting because I find this period of British history incredibly fascinating. This book is set during the 1850s, during the Industrial Revolution, and that was such a period of immense change for England. And of course, I also really loved John Thornton. John Thornton, you know, I think Mr. Darcy has got nothing on John Thornton. Like, he is a self-made man, he is smart, he is hardworking, believes in the value of work, but he's also such a puppy. Like, he is just everything that a man should be. Another complaint that I had is about the ending, because I don't think this is a spoiler, right? So basically, you know how Jane Austen had that lovely denouement at the end of all of her books where she's like, well, this is what happened after our couple got married. They moved to this house and they maintained this kind of relationship with these other people, and then eventually this happened. There was a whole long epilogue she would add at the end of her books, right? But this book does none of that. Gaskell does not like to dwell on any of that. Like, the ending of this book is just like, oh, our two lovers got together. That's the end. And I'm like, whoa, I want more. Surely there are more consequences to these people getting married, because John Thornton's mom does not like Margaret. So I just want to know how that played out in that household. And also, Margaret had another guy who wanted to be with her. I want to know what happened there. So the ending was sort of thrown together and abrupt. I wish it wasn't, but it did not take away from my enjoyment of the rest of the book. So 4.5 stars to North and South. Next up, during reading rush, I read the Metabarons Volume 7, Aghora. Of course, you've heard me talk ad nauseum about my love for this graphic novel series. So Metabarons is about a family of space mercenaries in some far off a time in the future that is very Dune inspired. And in each generation of this family, every son must kill his father successfully in mortal combat. And also, each member of the family receives a mutilation that is eventually replaced by a cybernetic implant. And this book definitely took a lot of twists on that idea in several unexpected ways. Like other books kind of did their own twist on this whole son killing his father, getting an implant kind of thing. But this one was definitely quite unexpected in a lot of ways. And this is probably my favorite volume of this book. There are a lot of great epic things that happen. And of course, I continue to love this universe and how it's set up and how weird Alejandro Jodorowsky's mind is. And it was also short and sweet, so I read it in about an hour and a half. The final book I read for Reading Rush was The Miniaturist by Jessie Burton. This book, I believe, is set during the Dutch Renaissance. It's about a girl called Nella Ortman who is married off to a much older Amsterdam merchant. When she moves into his household, she realizes that his home is filled with all kinds of secrets that she can't really understand yet. As a wedding gift, her husband gives her a giant 9-room dollhouse, and a miniaturist who makes miniature furniture slowly starts sending her items that seem to predict the future of the members of the household. So part of the intrigue was how the miniaturist knows what's going on in the household. But I think a bigger part of the story is the intrigue that results from all the secrets that the household has been keeping over the years. So the funny thing about this book is that the central mystery didn't even end up being the miniaturist. It really was about the twists and turns in the lives of these people. And there were a lot of twists, some very genuinely surprising. So this book ended up being more of a thriller to me than a mystery. At times, the book was genuinely frightening because of that mystery and thriller element. So I really did like this book. It was really beautifully written. I loved how well Jessie Burton described the atmosphere of Amsterdam at that time, the furniture, the dresses, the clothes, the food. The mystery of the Miniaturist ended up, I guess, being kind of a letdown, but also at the same time I felt like maybe if we went too much into the mystical aspect of the Miniaturist, it might ruin the book in some way, because that ended up being not the point of the book. I mean, the events in the lives of these people was enough to serve the plot of this story, because in the end, the Miniaturist work ended up just reflecting what was going on. But I did end up really liking this book, and even though the ending was kind of sad, I accepted it, and it ended up on a note of hope. So I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. It was beautiful. And the final book I read in the month of July was Wayward Son by Rainbow Rowell, and this has been on my 2020 TBR for a while. So this is the sequel to Carry On. This is a spin-off of Fangirl, right? Because in Fangirl, the main character is writing this fan fiction about the character Simon Snow, and Carry On was that fanfic. So Wayward Son is the sequel to that book. So Carry On was quite whimsical and funny and charming, and this had a lot of the same charm and whimsy, but I don't think there was as much of it in this book as in Carry On. So I think it was missing some of the charm that attracted me to the first book. So I think this was trying to go a bit more serious. Everyone's suffering from the repercussions of the events from the previous book. So I get that she was going for that, but I feel like that dampened some of the whimsy that I really liked in Carry On. As for writing, I feel like the action scenes were slightly confusing. It was really hard to kind of know who was where and what was going on. I enjoyed this read. It was fine. I like being with Simon and Baz and seeing their relationship. But overall, it was just missing a little something for me that would really have made me love this book. So I liked it, but it was just kind of okay. So that is my wrap up for the month of July. Like this video if you liked it, and please subscribe to my channel. Let me know what books you read in the month of July down below in the comments. You can also follow me on Twitter and Goodreads and Instagram, and I will see you in my next video.